These are notes for section 4.7. We are going to discuss the quadratic formula. Hopefully before you watch this video, I ask you to please look in your book on page 241, 242, and 243. If you look in the key concepts box, you will find the quadratic formula written out, which is what I have right here, and also the discriminant. And there's also some actual graphs. You can kind of put this all together and what it means. All right. So please make sure you refer back to those pages. All right. So first of all, let's take a look at the quadratic formula. Most of you have probably seen the quadratic formula back in Algebra 1. Okay, so it hopefully looks familiar. The quadratic formula is x equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. All right, we can use the quadratic formula to solve a quadratic equation. So previously we have learned how to find the solutions by graphing, by factoring, by completing the square. All right, so the quadratic formula is another method that you can use to find solutions to your quadratic equation. All right. The discriminant is kind of a special part of the quadratic formula. So when we talk about the discriminant, you can see that it is b squared minus 4ac. All right, so the discriminant is part of the quadratic formula. If you look at it, you'll notice that the discriminant is exactly what you see underneath the radical. Okay, that's important because if you do this tiny calculation of just the discriminant, not the entire formula, that will give you information about what kind of solutions you will have. All right, so if your discriminant, when you calculate it, is greater than 0, that means you will have two solutions, which again means your parabola will cross the x-axis at 2 points. All right. If you calculate your discriminant and it has a value of 0, what that means is your equation will have one solution, again, meaning your parabola will touch the x-axis at only one spot. All right. And then the last one here, it says that if the discriminant is less than 0, then you're going to have no real solutions. All right. And this is why, this part right here is why we just finished talking about imaginary numbers. All right. Because again, if the discriminant is the value underneath the radical, let's say, for example, I calculated my discriminant, it was -4. What's going to happen when I try to take the square root of my -4? All right, so again, that square root of a -4 would give me 2i, and that's where your imaginary numbers come in. And like we said, that means it has no real solution. All right, so what I'm going to do is we're just going to kind of work through a couple examples. You might want to get your calculator out. There's some little tricks here as far as how you enter this in and things like that. Again, the quadratic formula and the discriminant, along with some graphs, can be found on 241, 242, and 243 in your textbook. All right, so let's do this one first. Couple things, if you were wondering in the formula, what is this A, B, and C? All right, so this goes back to a while ago when we talked about quadratic equations. You want your equation to be in standard form. All right, so when it's in standard form, we have ax squared plus bx plus c, you want it always to equal 0. All right, when it's in standard form, the a that you saw in the formula will be whatever the coefficient is of the x squared term, the b is the coefficient of the x term, and then the c is the constant. All right, so the first thing you always want to do when you're using the quadratic formula is make sure that it's in standard form. So if it does not equal 0, you may have to rearrange it a little bit, move some things around. All right, basically, once you know what the A, B, and C are, when you're using a formula, it's just like following the directions. You have to put in the values exactly where the formula tells you to. All right, for the first example, we're just going to talk a little bit about the discriminant. It says find the discriminant and the number of real solutions. So this question is not really asking you to find the solutions. It's just asking you to tell me how many solutions will it have. All right, so again, our discriminant is just that one little part, b squared minus 4ac. Okay, so this is my discriminant. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at my equation here. First of all, decide if it's in standard form. If it is, then we're ready to go. We're going to start plugging in our a, b, and c values. All right, so here is the equation I have. X squared minus 6x equals 5. All right, this one is not quite in standard form because you can see I have the 5 over here. We want it equal to 0. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 5, we're going to move it over to the other side. All right, so I have x squared minus 6x minus 5 equals 0. So now we are in standard form. All right, my a value, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pencil in a 1. My a value would be a 1. My b value is negative 6. And my c value is negative 5. Okay, so that's a, that's b, and that's c. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to calculate our discriminant, just this little tiny part of the quadratic formula. All right, it says b squared. So we have negative 6 squared minus 4. We need to go times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 5. All right. Calculator-wise, again, when you're squaring a negative number on most calculators, again, you are going to make sure you include those parentheses in there so that your calculator does what you want. So we're going to take our negative 6 squared. All right, and then I usually just kind of keep on going down the line here. Minus 4, and I'm going to go times 1 and times negative 5. All right, and when I do that, my answer is 56. All right, so for this problem, we would say the discriminant is equal to 56, okay? Now, using this number, we can determine how many solutions we have. So again, is this, all we have to do, is it greater than 0, is it equal than 0, or is it less than 0? So 56 is greater than 0, so because my discriminant is greater than 0, I know I will have 2 real solutions to this particular equation. All right. Now, if they ask me to actually find the solutions, then I would have to keep on going with the rest of the formula, but that's not what this question asked. It just said, find the discriminant, which is 56, and tell me how many solutions it has. This one has 2 real solutions because my discriminant was greater than 0. All right. All right, now let's go ahead and actually find some solutions. All right, so I have 2 examples that we're going to work through here. And the directions this time say find the solution. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to just use that quadratic formula and finish it all the way to the end, basically. All right, so example number 2, we have x squared plus 4x equals negative 4. Again, similar to the last one, this one is not in standard form quite yet, so I do need to move that negative 4 over to the left side. All right, so that means I'm going to have x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 0. All right, we're going to identify our a, b, and c. Again, since they're, I'm going to go ahead and put my little 1 in front of the x. So this is a, this one's b, this one is c. All right, so we are going to plug into our quadratic formula. Okay, so x equals, we need the opposite of b. Okay, so I'm going to write negative 4. We put a plus or minus sign. Square root. All right, we need b squared. So I have 4 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 4. All right, so opposite of b, plus or minus, b squared minus 4 times a times c. All of this gets divided by 2 times a, which is 1. All right. At this point, we are going to do some work on the calculator, but we're going to kind of do it in little parts because usually your calculator is not going to be able to take this whole thing in. So I'm going to copy down my negative 4 plus or minus. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm not going to hit my square root button yet, but what I'm going to do is go ahead and calculate that part underneath. Again, that's the discriminant. So I'm going to calculate that. We've got 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 4. All right, and this has a value of 0. I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to go ahead and multiply the 2 times the 1, which is 2. All right, so the square root of 0 is just 0. So I can kind of just get rid of that. And that means x equals, I have a -4 being divided by a 2. All right, so this particular problem has one solution, okay? And when I did this discriminant part here, I kind of, at this point, knew I was only going to have one solution because, again, according to what I just told you on the front page there, if this is 0 underneath the radical, you will only get one solution, which is what we have here. All right. All right. Example number 3. Okay, we have x squared plus 12x plus 35 equals 0. All right, so first of all, this one is already in standard form. Everything's over here on the left. We have equals 0. All right, so again, let's identify the A, B, and C. I put my little 1 in front of here again. So this is the A. In front of the x term, we have a 12. That's the B. And at the end here, we have a 35. That would be the C. All right, so we're going to plug into our formula. So x equals, we need the opposite of B. So we have -12 plus or minus. Okay, we have our square roots. We need B squared. Okay, -4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is 35. All right, all over 2 times A, which is 1. All right, so now we're going to do a little calculator work here. Again, we're going to do just the discriminant part underneath, and we're just going to copy everything else down for a second. We got our -12 plus or minus. Put my square root there. I'm going to come back to that in a second. And then 2 times 1, my denominator is 2. All right. So in our calculator, we're going to do this part right here. Again, not hitting the square root button yet. We have 12 squared minus 4 times 1 times 35. All right, and I got a 4. All right, and that's a nice perfect square. Okay, so now I'm going to do a little simplifying and keep on going here. I'm going to copy down my -12 plus or minus. The square root of 4 is just 2. Okay, all of this has to be divided by 2. Okay. Now again, because my discriminant was greater than 0, again, that should give me a heads up that I should get 2 answers this time. Okay. To get my 2 answers, basically we're going to go through the numerator one time where we use the plus sign that you see. And then to get my second answer, we're going to go through that numerator again with the minus sign that you see. All right. So for my first answer, we would take our -12 plus a 2, and we're going to divide that by 2. All right, so -12 plus 2 would be -10. -10 divided by 2 will give me my first answer of -5. Okay, so there's one answer. Then we do the same thing. We go through and we use the minus sign this time. So again, this is still a -12. That doesn't change. But now we're going to subtract 2. Right? And again, divide that all by 2. So -12 minus a 2 would be -14. -14 divided by a 2 would give me a -7. All right, those would be my 2 solutions to that quadratic equation. All right. Again, you can find these formulas and the discriminant and the graphs in your book on page 241, 242, and 243. For your assignment, you will be asked to find the solutions for some of the problems like I showed you here. And then the first couple questions on the homework will just ask you this question here where it will say find the discriminant and tell me the number of solutions. All right, good luck.